You are about to experience Jackson Snyder Presents. Direct from the Vero Essin Yahad, a Hebrew Nation radio original program. JSP is a variety show seeking out Jewish and Christian origins, religion, theology, and history, and doing so in a fashion that is both educational and entertaining. Welcome to Jackson Snyder Presents.
How It Came About from Saturday to Sunday by Samuele Bacchiocchi, the late world's best scholar on the Sabbath. Roman repressive measures following the First and Second Jewish revolts spurred Christian change to Sunday worship. Scholars have long debated how the first day of the week, that is Sunday, came to be adopted by a majority of Christians as the day of rest and worship in place of the biblically prescribed seventh-day Sabbath. In Hebrew, the seventh day is called Shabbat, from which the English word Sabbath is derived. The classic explanation, as stated by Thomas Aquinas, is that, quote, the observance of the Lord's Day took the place of the observance of the Sabbath, not by virtue of the biblical precept, but by the institution of the church. In other words, the adoption of Sunday observance has been traditionally attributed to ecclesiastical authority rather than to biblical or apostolic precepts. This has been the position of most historians who have studied the question. Recently, some scholars have argued that Sunday observance has a biblical or apostolic origin. According to these scholars, from the inception of the church, the apostles themselves chose the first day of the week in place of the seventh day in order to commemorate the resurrection or Easter appearance of Jesus 3 days after his crucifixion. My own assessment of the sources is that this thesis is wrong on 2 counts. First, the change from Saturday to Sunday occurred sometime after 135 AD. Second, the change originated in Rome, not Jerusalem. The view that the Apostolic Jerusalem Church pioneered Sunday worship rests on 2 incorrect assumptions. The first incorrect assumption is that because the resurrection and appearance of Jesus occurred in Jerusalem on Sunday, supposedly, the apostles instituted Sunday worship to commemorate these events by the distinctive Christian liturgy. The second incorrect assumption is that the apostles were encouraged by the fact that the earliest Christians in Jerusalem, quote, no longer felt at home in the Jewish Sabbath service, unquote. The earliest documentary sources refute both these assumptions. Nothing in the New Testament prescribes or even suggests the commemoration of Jesus' resurrection on Sunday. In fact, Sunday is consistently denominated not as the day of the resurrection, but as the first day of the week. The earliest explicit reference to the observance of Sunday as the Christian Sabbath is by Justin Martyr around 150 AD. He mentions the resurrection as a basis for Sunday observance, but only as the second of 2 reasons, important but not predominant. These references hardly confirm the contention that the origin of Sunday, as sometimes claimed, quote, is to be found solely in the fact of the resurrection of Christ on the day after the Sabbath, unquote. If the early Jerusalem church had pioneered and promoted Sunday observance, we would expect to find that the primitive Christian community in Jerusalem broke away almost immediately from the Jewish religious traditions and services. Those who argue for an apostolic origin of Sunday observance make precisely this contention, but the opposite is the case. The Book of Acts, as well as several Judeo-Christian documents, persuasively demonstrate that both the ethnic composition and the theological orientation of the Jerusalem church were profoundly Jewish. Luke's characterization of the Jerusalem church as zealous for the law is an accurate description. The attachment of the Jerusalem church to the Mosaic law is reflected in some of the decisions of the so-called Jerusalem Council held about 40 to 50 AD and found in Acts 15, insofar as you can trust Acts. The exemption from circumcision is there granted only, quote, to the brethren who are of the Gentiles, unquote. No concession is made for Jewish Christians who must continue to circumcise their children. Moreover, of the 4 provisions made applicable by the Jerusalem Council to Gentiles, 1 is moral, that is, the abstention from unchastity, but 3 are ceremonial, that is, even Gentile Christians are ordered to abstain, quote, from contact with idols and from eating what has been strangled and from eating blood, unquote. This concern of the Jerusalem Council for ritual defilement and Jewish food laws reflects its continued attachment to Jewish ceremonial law and its commands. It would be unthinkable that this church at this early time would change the Sabbath to Sunday. James' statement to the Jerusalem Council in support of his proposal that concessions be made to Gentile Christians is also significant. It sure is, and this is what is often left out of the quote. James says, "For generations past, Moses has had spokesmen in every city. He has read every Shabbat in the synagogues." All interpreters recognize that both in his proposal and in its justification, James reaffirms the binding nature of the Mosaic law, which was customarily taught every Shabbat in the synagogue, that is, every Saturday. Paul's last visit to Jerusalem, somewhere around 58 to 60 AD, provides further insight. The apostle was informed by James and the elders that thousands of converted Jews were all zealous for the law, Acts 21:20. Paul was then pressured by the same leaders to prove that he also lived in observance of the law, verse 24, by undergoing a rite of purification at the temple. In the light of this deep commitment to the observance of the law, it's hardly conceivable that the Jerusalem church would have abrogated one of its chief precepts, that is, Sabbath keeping, and pioneered Sunday worship instead. Evidence such as this has led some scholars to argue for the Palestinian origin of Sunday observance at a slightly later time, after the Roman destruction of the temple in 70 AD. The flight of the Christians from Jerusalem to Pella, as well as the psychological impact of the destruction of the temple, weaned Palestinian Christians away from Jewish observances such as Sabbath keeping, it is argued. Both Eusebius and Epiphanius inform us, however, that the Jerusalem church after 70 AD, and until Hadrian's siege of Jerusalem in 135, was composed of and administered by converted Jews, characterized as, quote, zealous to insist on the literal observance of the law, unquote. The Orthodox Palestinian Jewish Christian sect of the Nazarenes, who most scholars regard as, quote, the very direct descendants of the primitive community, unquote, of Jerusalem, retained Sabbath keeping on Saturday until the 4th century. Indeed, Saturday Sabbath keeping was regarded as one of this church's distinguishing characteristics. This implies that Saturday Sabbath observance was not only the traditional custom of the Jerusalem church, but also of Palestinian Jewish Christians long after 70 AD. This conclusion is corroborated by the Curse of the Christians, that is the Birkat HaMinim, a prayer introduced by the Palestinian rabbinical authorities somewhere between 80 and 90 AD as an effective bar to clandestine Jewish Christian participation in Jewish synagogue services. Participation by Jewish Christians in Saturday synagogue services would hardly be a concern to the rabbinical authorities if Palestinian Christians had adopted Sunday as their Sabbath. In other words, that's the 18th benediction, where at the end of the synagogue service, all heretics and Nazarenes are cursed by the entire congregation. Of all the Christian churches, the Jerusalem church was both ethnically and theologically the closest and most loyal to Jewish religious traditions, and thus the least likely to change the day of the Sabbath. After 135 AD, radical changes occurred in the Jewish world. In that year, the Roman Emperor Hadrian crushed the Second Jewish Revolt, which had been unsuccessfully led by Bar Kokhba. Jerusalem became a Roman colony from which Jews and Jewish Christians were excluded. Hadrian renamed the city Aelia Capitolina. He prohibited the practice of the Jewish religion throughout the empire. Sabbath observance was especially condemned. A whole body of adversos Judaeos, that is, against the Jews, literature began to appear. Following the Roman lead, Christians developed a Christian theology of separation and contempt for the Jews. Characteristic Jewish customs such as circumcision and Sabbath keeping were castigated. Sunday observance could well have been introduced at this time as an attempt to emphasize to the Roman authorities the Christian distinction from Judaism. New religious festivals such as Sunday keeping could be adopted and enforced only by a church that had severed its ties with Judaism. As we have seen, this excludes the Jerusalem church prior to 135 AD. After 135 AD, the Jerusalem church lost its religious prestige and went almost into oblivion, so it could hardly have been the source of so important a change. In fact, by the Council of Nicaea, the Jerusalem apostolate was not even permitted to come to the ecumenical conference. The most likely church for the source of this change is the Church of Rome. Here can be found the social, religious, and political conditions which permitted and encouraged the abandonment of Saturday as the Sabbath and the adoption of Sunday worship instead. Contrary to most Eastern churches, the Church of Rome was predominantly composed of Gentile converts. Paul, in his epistle to this church, explicitly affirms, "I am speaking to you Gentiles," Romans 11:13. The predominant Gentile membership apparently contributed to an early Christian differentiation from the Jews in Rome. In 64 AD, for instance, Nero placed the charge of arson exclusively on Christians, thus distinguishing them from the Jews. Beginning with the first Jewish revolt against Rome in 66, various repressive measures, military, political, and fiscal, were imposed upon the Jews, especially as their resurgent nationalism resulted in violent uprisings in many places outside of Palestine. Militarily, Vespasian and Titus crushed the first Jewish revolt, and Hadrian the second Jewish revolt. Politically, Vespasian abolished the Sanhedrin and the office of the high priest. Later, Hadrian outlawed the practice of Judaism altogether. Fiscally, that is, in regards to taxes, the Jews were subjected to a discriminatory tax, the fiscus Judaicus, which was introduced by Vespasian and increased by Domitian and later by Hadrian. That these repressive measures were intensely experienced in Rome is indicated by the contemptuous anti-Jewish literary comments of such writers as Seneca, 65, Persius, 62, Petronius, 66, Quintilian, 100, Martial, 104, Plutarch, 119, Juvenal, 125, and Tacitus, 120, all of whom lived in Rome most of their professional lives. They reviled the Jews racially and culturally, deriding Sabbath-keeping and circumcision as examples of Judaism's degrading superstitions. The mounting hostility of the Roman populace against the Jews forced Titus, though unwillingly, to ask the Jewish Berenice, sister of Herod the Younger, whom he wanted to marry, to leave Rome. She was unpopular. These circumstances, as well as the conflict between Jews and Christians, apparently encouraged not only the production of a whole body of anti-Jewish literature in which a Christian theology of contempt for the Jews was developed, but also the repudiation of characteristic Jewish customs such as Sabbath-keeping. Church of Rome adopted concrete measures to wean Christians away from the Sabbath veneration in order to enhance Sunday worship exclusively. Justin Martyr, for instance, writing in the mid-2nd century, reduces the observance of the Sabbath to a temporary Mosaic ordinance which Elohim imposed exclusively on the Jews as, quote, a mark to single them out for punishment they so well deserve for their infidelities, unquote. The kind of negative reinterpretation of the Sabbath led Christians to transform their Saturday Sabbath observance from a day of feasting, joy, and religious celebration into a day of fasting, with no Eucharistic celebration or religious assemblies permitted. The Saturday fast served not only to express sorrow for Christ's death, but also, as emphatically stated by Pope Sylvester, 335, to show contempt for the Jews, execration Judaeorum, and for their Sabbath feasting, distractio ciborum. The sadness and hunger resulting from the fast would enable Christians to avoid, quote, appearing to observe the Sabbath with the Jews, unquote, and would encourage them to enter more eagerly and joyfully into the observance of Sunday. Because the basic function of the Christian Saturday fast was to discourage the observance of this day as a Sabbath and to enhance Sunday worship, it seemed likely that the Saturday fast and Sunday worship both originated contemporaneously and at the same place. There's no question that the Saturday fast was introduced by the Church of Rome. Moreover, the weekly Saturday fast developed as an extension or counterpart of the annual Holy Saturday of Easter season, when all Christians fasted. The Easter fast, like the Saturday Sabbath fast, was designated to express not only sorrow for Christ's death, but also contempt for those whom Christians considered its perpetrators, namely the Christ-killing Jews. Moreover, since the weekly and the annual Saturday fasts, as well as the weekly Sunday observance and Easter Sunday, are frequently presented by the Church Fathers as interrelated in their meaning and function, presumably all these practices originated at the same time as part of the Easter Sunday celebration. It's important, therefore, to ascertain the time, place, and causes of the origin of Easter Sunday, since this could well mark the genesis of Sunday observance as well. In his account of the Easter controversy, Eusebius describes Bishop Victor of Rome, 199, as the champion of the Easter Sunday custom, and Polycrates, Bishop of Ephesus, as the defender of the Quartodecamen tradition. Quartodecamen means 14 and refers to the date the feast is observed according to the Jewish calendar, that is, the 14th of the Jewish month of Nisan, when Jews observe Passover. Irenaeus, Bishop of Lyon, 178, intervened as peacemaker in the controversy. He urged Bishop Victor to emulate his predecessors, namely Anicetus and Pius and Hyginus and Telesphoros and Sixtus, who, though they celebrated Easter on Sunday, nevertheless were at peace with those who observed it on the 14th day of Nisan. The fact that Irenaeus mentions Bishop Sixtus, 126 AD, as the first bishop who did not observe the Quartodecamen Passover suggests the possibility that the feast began to be celebrated in Rome on Sunday at about that time. The innovation could well have been motivated by a desire to avoid Hadrian's repressive measures against Judaism. This hypothesis is indirectly supported by Epiphanius' statement that the Easter controversy, quote, arose after the time of the exodus of the bishops of the circumcision from Jerusalem. This exodus occurred after Hadrian crushed the Second Jewish Revolt in 135. Since Sixtus, who served from 116 to about 126, was Bishop of Rome only a few years earlier, he could have well been the initiator of Easter Sunday. Some time must be allowed before a new custom becomes sufficiently widespread to provoke a controversy. While the exact date of the origin of Easter Sunday may be subject to dispute, there seems to be a consensus of scholarly opinion that it was in Rome that the new custom was introduced for avoiding, quote, even the semblance of Judaism, unquote. Constantine, in his letter to the Christian bishops at the Council of Nicaea in 325, exemplifies the marked anti-Judaic motivation for the repudiation of the Quartodecamen Passover. He writes, "We ought not therefore to have anything in common with the Jews, for the Savior has shown us another way. In unanimously adopting this mode, that is Easter Sunday, we desire, dearest brethren, to separate ourselves from the detestable company of the Jews." The letter of the Council of Nicaea represents the culmination of a controversy initiated 2 centuries earlier that centered in Rome. The same anti-Judaic motivations that caused the replacement of the Jewish Quartodecamen Passover with Easter Sunday also accounts for the contemporaneous substitution of Sabbath keeping with Sunday worship. This argument is supported not only by the fact that the Jewish Sabbath shared the same anti-Judaic condemnation as the Jewish Quartodecamen Passover, but also by the close nexus between the observance of Easter Saturday, Sunday, a fast followed by a day of joy, and that of its weekly counterpart, the Saturday fast followed by the Sunday service. The basic unity between these Easter and weekly observances is explicitly affirmed by the Fathers, and further suggests a common origin in the Church of Rome at the same time and owing to the same causes. Moreover, only in Rome was there the, quote, preeminent authority, unquote, the potentior principalitas, exercised by the Bishop of Rome, capable at that time of influencing the majority of Christians to adopt new religious observances. Thus it seems clear that Sunday observance originated in Rome in the early part of the 2nd century, but after 135 AD, for the reasons I have outlined. While these social, political, and religious conditions explain why a new day of worship was substituted for the Saturday Sabbath, they do not explain why Sunday rather than Friday, the day of Christ's Passion, or another day was chosen. The influence of sun worship with its sun day provides the most plausible explanation. The cult of Sol Invictus, the invincible sun, as shown by Gaston H. Halsberg, became, quote, dominant in Rome and in other parts of the empire from the early part of the 2nd century, unquote. We know that the Roman sun cults otherwise influenced Christian thought and liturgy. The Church Fathers frequently condemned Christian veneration of the sun. In early Christian art and literature, the sun is often used as a symbol to represent Christ. The orientation of early Christian churches was changed. Instead of facing Jerusalem like synagogues, churches were oriented to the east. The Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, the birthday of the invincible sun, was chosen as the Christian Christmas. A 2nd century change in the Roman calendar also suggests the influence of sun worship on the Christian choice of Sunday as the new Sabbath. The 7th-day week was first adopted by the Roman Empire in the 1st century AD. At that time, the days of the week were named after the planets, as they still are. Saturn's day, Saturday, was originally the 1st day of the week. Sun's day, or Sunday, was originally the 2nd day of the week. Under the influence of sun worship, however, a change occurred in the 2nd century. The sun's day, Sunday, became the 1st day of the week, the most honored position. Each of the other days was advanced one day, and Saturn's day, therefore, became the 7th day of the week. This development probably influenced Roman Christians with a pagan background to adopt and adapt the sun's day for their Christian worship. This would serve to emphasize to non-Christian Romans the Christian similarity to familiar Roman practice and the dissimilarity to Jewish custom. All of this supports, if only indirectly, the suggestion that Sunday was chosen for Christian worship because it was the sun's day. A more direct indication is provided by the use of the sun as a symbol to justify Sunday observance. The motifs of light and of the sun are frequently invoked by the Church Fathers to develop a theological justification for Sunday worship. Elohim's creation of light on the 1st day and the resurrection of the Son of Justice, which occurred on the same day, coincided with the day of the sun. Jerome, to cite only one example, explains, quote, "If it is called the day of the sun by the pagans, we most willingly acknowledge it as such, since it is on this day that the light of the world appeared, and on this day the Son of Justice has risen." Unquote. The day of the sun, then, may well have been viewed by Christians familiar with its veneration as a providential and valid substitution for the 7th-day Sabbath, since the substitution could well explain biblical mysteries to the pagan mind by means of effective and familiar symbols. By Samuele Bacchiocchi, foremost expert on the Sabbath. Now, if you've gotten this far with this historical training, I would like to follow it up with my own Sabbath struggle many years ago, which is probably very much like your Sabbath struggle, if you've had that struggle yet, to let you know that you're not the only one. You're not the only one to read the Bible literally concerning the commandments and to, in one manner or the other, come out of at least the Babylon of Sunday worship. So I will do that next. Thank you for listening. Don't have any place to go on Shabbat to fulfill the commandment for a holy convocation, come join us online every Shabbat at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. Download and install the client from zoom.us, and when the time comes, just surf to www.theyahad.com. It's that easy. You can be anonymous if you want to. You're going to hear a great liturgy and an even greater sermon every week. Pretty soon you'll get to know the people that come, and you'll feel good knowing that you worshiped on Shabbat with other like-minded believers. You're invited. Download and install the Zoom meeting client from zoom.us, and then surf to theyahad.com. See you there! You You have been listening to Jackson Snyder Presents on Hebrew Nation Radio.